This is the Bottom Shot Podcast.
Pulvereri is up high. They come out of turn number 4. Stutter between the turns. The fans come to their feet.
It is Ted Christopher still in command. Keith Rocco right there on his back bumper.
Bringing Stafford Motor Speedway's past and present together.
They are side by side running for the finish line. It's a photo finish.
Deep into turn number 3. He goes in deeper than most. Christopher is in trouble. It is Keith Rocco to slingshot to the bottom, and he'll take down the win.
A Stafford Motor Speedway production where we will hear from the personalities from the past and present that found success on the legendary half-mile oval.
The scoreboard shows goose eggs as they wait. It's Pulvereri. He wins it by inches over Richie Evans in the Spring Sizzler.
Unbelievable chain of events.
Now, here are your hosts, Paula Root and Kyle Rickey.
Back here on the Bottom Shot Podcast, Season 3, rolling on with a very familiar face to the Stafford Motor Speedway. The Director of Racing Operations, Tom Fox, joins us. Tom, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Hall.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Paul. Good to be here. I've watched them all.
And usually we start, and usually the guests have comments about what they've experienced here in this hall over the years, usually after hours, after a race program. Any fun experiences come to mind for you?
Not really. Most of the Sizzlers of the 70s and 80s, I was a little bit young to come up here and partake in the festivities afterwards. But it's always been iconic, obviously. Mm-hmm. All the stuff that you see there is my childhood, for sure. Watched them all race. It's a cool place to be, for sure.
So let's go all the way back to the start. When was kind of the first time you got exposed to the sport and exposed to modifieds?
Late 60s, we lived in Westport. We went to Danbury Race Arena. My dad used to round up all the kids in the neighborhood. We'd all pile in the back of his wagon back when there was the jump seats and all that stuff, and there was 5 of us in the back with no belts, driving facing the wrong way, that era. So I went to Danbury for a couple of years, and then we moved locally here, and we started going to the Speed Bowl. 1969 was my first year going to the racetrack.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was your first reaction as a kid? Where you just kind of
loved it?
Was it immediate?
Yeah, absolutely. Loved it. Yep.
What about it? What got you hooked?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically what it was, but clearly the excitement. We were growing up. Paul Hurd and I lived across the street from each other, and if we could race it, we raced it, and if we could put a motor on it, we put a motor on it. If we could modify it, we modified it. So naturally drawn to motorsports and that kind of stuff.
So are there any drivers that kind of, you were a fan of that caught your eye?
Yeah, Don LaJoie. Don LaJoie in the 7-Eleven. Obviously, he was a crowd favorite at Danbury. Bob Potter fan at the Bowl growing up, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yep.
You mentioned Danbury. How long after the initial experience at Danbury did you discover places like Waterford and here at Stafford?
Well, I went to Danbury for a year or two, and I was too young to remember a lot of it, but I do know that they used to stack cars up 3 or 4 high when they wrecked them. There's black and white pictures that are it looks like a parking garage. The old modifieds used to flip and roll and endo and all that stuff. So they had some pretty good wrecks there. But we started going to the Speed Bowl in '69 immediately, and I was, we went there with my dad and all the kids in the neighborhood. Again, Saturday we'd be out playing, and it would get to be around 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and all the kids would go home and clean up and then come back to my house, and my dad would drive us all to the track.
And so how do you transition from, you're obviously a kid, but how do you become a driver? And when does that change occur, and how does it get started?
Mid-'70s, we're in the grandstands watching practice, and we were Dickie Doo fans, Dick Saravola, my dad, and they were good friends. Used to go to his garage all the time and look at his Pinto mod. I mean, it's kind of cool being a kid and seeing all that. When I was 14-ish, they made an announcement that they were coming out with a street stock division. And I remember sitting next to my dad, and I said, we got to build a car. And he was like, okay. So he went and he bought a 68 Chevelle. And that winter, we proceeded to put a roll cage in the car. It was black water pipe. We were welding it. I remember he had 6 extension cords from the dryer running out the back door, out across the grass. And we're stripping this car down, and he's trying to weld the roll cage in, and I'm holding a piece of pipe up. And my dad's like, all right, ready? and he flips the helmet down and he strikes the arc, and I get shocked and I drop the pipe and it falls, and he yells at me and he's like, pick the pipe up. So I pick the pipe up, we go again, I get shocked, I drop it. He's yelling at me like, I'm not going to do this with you, blah, all this stuff. And I said, I'm getting shocked. And of course, later on in life, when I look back at the fact that he had 14 connections laying in the snow and the water, it's no surprise there, right?
So was your dad ever involved in other teams before that, or is this kind of his first
No,
endeavor?
yeah, we were just fans,
Wow.
and he became the 31 street stock because we were Dickie Doo fans. Dickie ran the 30. Dickie Ceravola was the 31, and he started racing in '76. Whenever the division started there, he was like the 5th car on the track. His first time out, he was a top 5. Just claim to fame. He finished 5th with 5 cars out there. And my dad raced for a couple of years. In '79, I decided to build a car myself. I was 15, and I started racing against him. And I was the 33, and we had a 32. It was team car. It was Ed Yarrington Jr. or Paul Hurd, depending
Ed
upon
Yarrington
who was.
Jr.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's an early Stafford tie then.
Yeah. His senior was obviously the competitor here, and ended up being the race director,
Yeah.
maybe the general
He was the
manager.
promoter for a while.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of ties there. Good family.
Yeah.
So what's that first time on the track like?
The first time on the track, I actually stole my dad's car, lined up for practice, and went out and ran it.
Did he know?
No.
How did you go? Did
He
he
told
turn
me
some
I should-
heads? Did you turn some heads?
Yeah, I was in the way. The typical, I thought I was going 100, and they passed me so fast on the inside and the outside. Yeah, I was like 14 years old when I took it out. So, but I knew I wanted to race, and obviously I needed to learn how to drive as well.
So that's the first time out when you're 14.
Yep.
Then you build a car.
Yep.
When do you start to realize you're pretty good at it? Does it take a while?
In my
or
20s.
It takes that long.
Oh, I sucked.
You were bad.
Yeah, I was really bad, and if I was smart, I would have quit.
Really?
Yeah.
So
Like,
what
legit.
kept you going? Just say you was addicted?
I was a fan, yeah. That's
Yeah.
all, yeah.
Who were some of the cars that were in the division as well?
Bob Fiella, Dennis Cardos, Bob Sellers, the dad. Trying to think, all the Gator boys came up through there running their Torinos and stuff. This is like the Wayback Machine. All the pictures are black and white. It's like, that's before your time, for sure.
What was the track like back then? I mean, I assume it's fairly similar to what's there now.
Yeah, the track surface was very similar. The track was very barren. It literally looked like one of those Lost Speedway episodes on Dale Jr.'s Download. There was just trees, and there was nothing in turn 1 and 2. It was just a bunch of trees and weeds and all that stuff, and there was grass growing through the cracks of the track. The wall was wood that mostly was painted white, but old paint and tore up. And it was an old facility, but it was a blast to race on, for sure.
It's a great track. It still is.
Yep.
So you said you were terrible, right?
Yeah. Some may
Were
argue
you
that never fixed. It never repaired itself.
Were you learning the car? Like what kind of guy? Like was there someone who came on board your team to help you improve? Like what sparked the improvement? Because you go on to win a load of races, so it's not like you were terrible.
That
forever.
was way later on. No, that was certainly later on. So I bought the first Steve Smith books on suspension and chassis and construction. Ended up being a truck builder up in Worcester, working with building satellite trucks, news vans, that kind of stuff, working with aluminum. I started to make everything on my car that I could out of aluminum, understanding the weight gains, started working down that path, and I created a really good race car, and that was a whole lot easier for me to learn how to race. My cars sucked at the beginning,
So you were fabricating the car now. This is like
Well,
your
it's a-
own. You took
yeah.
a car and you were just kind of
It's a street stock.
lightening it.
I've built every, other than when I went modified racing, I built everything that we raced, and then even when we were mod racing later on, I'd build the A-frames and the bodies and do all that stuff, like some of the top guys do now.
So to bounce off of Paul's question, you improved. How long did it take to find the success that you ultimately found?
91-ish is when I started winning a lot of races.
So about a decade.
Yeah. Like I said, if I was smart, I would have quit.
I feel like 10 years, most people do give up.
Yeah.
Right.
Most people either just get tired of Did you wreck a lot? I guess at the Speed Bowl,
I wrecked early on.
you don't really junk a lot of stuff.
You
As
wreck,
much
you wreck,
as-
but you don't junk. That's correct. Yeah.
Which probably, I mean, you're
it-
probably on a budget. You probably had only a one car. If you came to Stafford and you balled it up, you might have been done.
Yeah, I would have been done for a while for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I went out with my car, which was a pretty good-looking Chevelle. Looked nice. The paint job was nice. Had it all hand-lettered. I went 3 or 4 laps and did the typical, came in free, overcorrected, went up the hill, hit the railroad ties. The car rolled back, left the bumper and the grill in the wall. The radiator was stuffed. I got out of the car. My dad was in the practice session with me. He stopped and he got out and he walked over to me. And I remember there's a picture of it that I have. He walked up to me to see if I was okay, and I said, "Get out of here! You're embarrassing me." It's like people are watching, you know. So that was my introduction. That was my first time on the track with my car. I wrecked it in practice. You had to get there pretty early to see me race.
So what's interesting is you kind of, it sounds as though you learned everything you know about race cars, or at least to start, from books,
Yeah, how to
like the basics.
Yes, the basics. They're really driving books as well. There was a lot of books on the market back then in the 70s and 80s. You could buy the paperback books on just driving techniques and all that stuff, and I kind of learned it. And it's actually a pretty good lesson. I have this talk with a lot of drivers. You can learn how to do this. Not everybody is Jeff Gordon.
Right.
You know, you can, if you apply yourself, hopefully you go through a better curve than I did. But particularly with mentors and people in your corner helping out, one of the aspects I like about being here on Friday night is I get to see the young kids and I get to talk to them about the potential for their career, like what they have available to them if they stick with it and they apply themselves. Didn't really have that back in my day. My dad was very helpful, but he was learning as well.
Yeah, it
so.
sounded like he started
He started
2 years
before
before
me,
you.
yeah.
So it's really interesting because I mean, coming on the show here, most people, I can't think of any of our guests that didn't have, like a parent or a family member who drove or was a setup guy or a builder.
Yeah.
So it can't be very common. I mean, I guess now it might be a little bit more because you can get into like carts.
Yep.
Yeah.
Way less technical.
Yep.
But it's cool to hear that you opened up a textbook to learn about suspension, and that's how you got your start, and now you're a tech guy.
Yeah.
All these days later,
Yeah.
you could probably write a book.
Yep.
Well, I guess you do every year.
Yeah,
5 of them.
I read 5 books. Yeah. So yeah, and I bought a set of scales in 1980, regular scales, not grain scales. So I got to learn weights, how wheel weights work, the importance of when you're fabricating the car. I was weighing components and weighing the chassis as I was building the roll cage, doing a lot of stuff way back then that was probably a little bit unusual, but that was the side of it. I like the technical side of it. What I miss about not racing now isn't driving. It's working on the race car. Yeah.
60 wins at Waterford. Do you remember the first?
Yeah.
When was it? Where was it? How? I mean, kind of walk us through that night.
Who'd you beat?
1980. Of all people, Dick Saravolo.
You beat your favorite driver.
I did. Yeah.
That is pretty cool.
Yep. It was my fourth mod race. So I had run street stocks.
No wins in the street stocks.
No, not leading up to that. Huh. No, I sucked. It's legit.
I mean, I know how that feels.
You can laugh if you want. Yeah. So my dad bought a modified in '82. He bought Lenny Podbielski's Vega, the 22. He raced it throughout that year. I was still racing street stocks. He didn't like open wheels. He wasn't comfortable sitting in it. It's a much lower sitting in the car. Your legs are straighter out. There's a lot of things that he just didn't find comfortable, and he didn't like it. He also had to go to the 47 number, which is where my number comes from, because the 31 was Saravolo in that division. So he went to 47 because he was a Ron Bouchard fan. That was the whole. That was right around that whole deal.
And this is a modified or an SK modified?
This is a regular mod.
Modified, okay.
Yep. So he asked me if I wanted to drive it for the last event of '82. I drove it. I loved it. The car was awful. But he drove my street stock. I drove his mod for the last event. And then over the winter, I got hooked up with Ron Uhas Sr., who was building chassis dynamic copy chassis. Dick Traynor had bought a CD car Long story, but we built 5 chassis that were CD copies, and because I went there and worked all winter to build these cars, one of my payoffs was a chassis.
Oh, cool.
So I took all my dad's stuff, all the parts off of it that would roll into that. We made a brand new CD-style car. I was working at Ed's Auto Machine, who's got his sticker on the side of a lot of these championship cars behind us. Built a really good motor for it, and I went mod racing in 1983 and 84. That went way better for me than my street stocks did, and I won my 4th time out.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you're a 4-star in a modified.
Yep.
Against some of the best in the business.
There were some good guys there. Yeah.
And that was kind of peak. I mean, it was the middle of the top era of the modifieds there.
Yeah. It was getting close to the end, too.
Yeah. Well, it's cyclical, right? Isn't that what they all say?
It sure is. Yep.
So you continued to race the mod.
Ran the
For
mod
how
for a
long?
couple years, battled for the championship the second year with Gomer Taylor and Potter and Hewitt. It's kind of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, had a good year. Then 85 rolls around and the cars turned to SKs, which you guys know something about, the Arute family. You guys rolled in there and changed things up, brought some professionalism to the track,
Yeah.
a lot of things that it needed. I sold my car to Jay Stewart, who built an SK engine, and I drove for Jay in the SK division.
Okay.
That lasted maybe 7 or 8 races. Weren't getting the performance that he wanted. I wasn't happy either. We like each other but hate each other, obviously. So I moved along. He had a couple of other people in the car throughout the course of the season, but I sat out most of the 85 inaugural SK season. I ran some of the races, sat out most of it, started building a late model for myself because that's what I could really afford to do at that point in time, and came back late model racing and ran that up until I went SK racing again in the 2000s.
So to jump back a bit, because we kind of skipped over this, when you went from your street stock to the modified, you said it was just better.
Yeah.
What did you like about it? Like, what was it the power? Was it the the weight of the car, the big tire? Like, why was it cool to you?
Well, it went good right out of the box.
So that's always helpful.
Yes. So pretty easy to put the wheels in the right place on
Yeah.
those cars versus a 68 Chevelle.
68 Chevelle.
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
80s.
Yeah, my dad's first race car was like 11 years old. We cut it up and made a race car out of it.
Wow.
You'd think of doing that nowadays, right?
Well, a fun fact is, do you know what John Blake's car is, Kyle?
No, what?
Tell him, Tom.
That car, I built that car in '99.
Oh, my.
A '61 late model here.
Is that the last car you
That's
built,
one
right?
of the, one of the last cars I built when I was
and that
building
car
race cars.
got a victory
It
in
did.
2021.
It
Yeah.
did.
Yep.
Let's talk about, you mentioned that the era of change. You meant, 85? That's the year the tour started on the NASCAR side of things. SKs are becoming more prevalent on a weekly basis. What's that era kind of like for you on the competitor side of things?
I was, because I went modified racing, I started looking at all the tracks that ran modifieds and where I could go with that deal in the early 80s, 83, 84. I went to Oxford with my car. I ran some of the open races, ran Seekonk, running against, the Bodine brothers, the Bouchard brothers, like racing against the Sherry Cup 12. Like, that was a really fun era. I was way out of my league. I came here every Friday to watch those guys race, and then I tried to pick a small track where I could be relevant to go race against them at, because I would have been outclassed here for sure. So that whole era, all the modifieds, when they became tour, when the tour started picking out all the tracks that they were going to go to. It was a fun era for me for sure, but I didn't know how the whole I thought NASCAR was going to take it and go, and they kind of did, but the old modified racing was really good in and of itself before NASCAR was even involved. And I don't mean to disparage any part of that, but there was plenty. You could go to any racetrack and watch probably a double header of every star in an open wheel car, and we did that on a regular basis,
So in that time, kind of like a little foreshadowing, are you interested in kind of like the sport in general, like the rules and like kind of what's going on with the changes? Is that something that's even interesting to you then, or is you just, I'm a driver, I'm building cars?
Yeah, no, I was just interested in the competitive side of it. I've always for most of my career, I would just look at the sandbox that they'd make you work in and then just try to be as effective as possible. I didn't really get too critical of the system and how it all worked until later on.
And then eventually you do have a Sizzler start at Stafford. Is that in the 80s too, or is that a little bit later on?
That's in the 90s.
Okay.
That's actually in a Ben Dodge car.
Oh, okay.
I drove a Thompson race and a couple of Stafford races for him.
So you go back to the late model. You win a bunch, right? Is that out of the gate as well? Is that an immediate, you're back in a winning form?
Yeah, the late model that I built in 85, 86, 87, we came up here, ran some races, traveled all around with it, started figuring out really what makes those big stock cars work. And then 1990, one of those years, I won 11 races and lost the championship by like 20 points.
Was there a drop rule?
No. No, I actually don't know the answer to that because I didn't concern myself with any of that stuff. But the corner turned at that point, and I started winning many more races and some championships. But it was all my race car. I told Keith Rocco this a long time ago. When I was running my SK, I would unload at the bowl, and I would be 2/10 faster than everybody. But I only won 2 features. If somebody good was in my car, they would have won tons of races.
So you're saying you just weren't good?
No,
Is that what you're saying?
I left a lot on the table. I learned
60 wins is no joke.
Yeah, but yeah. Thank you. It was good, but it was clearly the car. Is the point that I'm making? I had a good race car.
A handful of wins here at Stafford.
Yes.
Any stand out?
I think we won the 50 and the 100 here one year. The 100 didn't stand. Had to go through tech here, and I got cylinder head issues.
What happened there?
Yeah,
Do you want to tell
thanks
that
for that. Yeah, no, that's fine. No, we rolled in here with a really good team, racing against Greco, Herb Bennett, all those guys who raced here back then. Rolled in and was fast right off the trailer. We won 4 or 5 races in that one year. Led the points right up to the end. Won the 100 lapper. Went through tech. They thought the cylinder heads were too smooth. Put the finger in there and rubbed it 450 times. Took the heads off. Sent them out to get inspected, and we were DQ'd on the following Tuesday. So the only DQ in my career.
It's only one.
Yeah. So I lost the championship by like 5 points here, I think. To CJ Fry.
You ran the full season.
It was a game
here.
changer. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So then, I guess to back up then, what was the first time you came to Stafford and kind of
mid-'80s?
Yeah, was it a late model?
Yeah. Or I don't know, late model or street stock. I don't know what you called it back then.
That style car.
Yeah.
So what was it like? Your first time here at the big. I mean, you sound like you've been to some other big tracks before then, but what was it like coming to Stafford? Did you take to it? Did you like it?
I like it. It's a driver's track for sure. I liked it because you had to get in and roll through the center, and once you figured that out, you could really change how your car went based upon your driving. And a lot of tracks you don't have the luxury of doing that. I raced at Thompson as well. I traveled all around. Did the Tri-Track series, the Thompson, Waterford, Stafford. You had to run like 5 or 6 races at each event, and then you qualified for Tri-Track money and all that stuff. I did that back in that era, and I like this place a lot. I just couldn't get here on enough Fridays to make that whole deal work. Typical. I still hear that now in the paddock area. Went to Thompson, and I think I won like my 3rd time out at Thompson. I won one of the World Series events in 1986. Kind of a boring track to drive. I may get yelled at for that, but
Stafford?
No, Thompson for the World Series. No, not Stafford.
Stafford, you're busy.
No. So I didn't race Thompson much either. I think I ran one full season at Thompson in the 35 years that I raced. That was it.
You mentioned the term roll the center. I think you're always a good explainer of stuff to people that don't understand what some terminology can mean.
Yeah.
Can you explain to a listener what does that even mean? I mean, if you're not a driver and you never really driven a race car, even some drivers don't even know what that means. So
yeah.
What does that mean? Explain to a listener what that term means.
Drive down the straightaway, you got your foot all the way to the floor. You put yourself in the right position for turn entry where you want the car to start. When you start to roll off the gas, the amount of time in between your throttle lift and your brake application typically is the middle. If you break it up into 4, each turn 1 and 2 is 4 different turns, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So you get into 1, you're 1. You get down to the middle of 1 and 2 is 2. Coming out of 2 is 3, and back on this backstretch is 4. 2 is the most important quadrant of the entire deal. You have to slow the car down enough, turn the car enough, all without loading the right front tire, overloading the right front tire, because that's the only thing that's going to tell you when it's time to get back out of the turn. You drive all the way down the straightaway, you get into the turn, you're braking, decelerating, loading the front tires, turning, loading the front tires. The front tire doesn't want to turn. Everybody pushes up in the middle. They drive into turn 1, they push up in the middle. The right front's overworked. Once you figure out how to decrease the amount of load on the right front and still carry speed through the middle, that means you're ready to get back on the gas. You can't get on the throttle if you're waiting on the right front. It doesn't work. So rolling the middle of the turn has a lot to do with where the car is, the attitude of the car when you lift, how long you lift for, how early you apply the brake. Once you figure out that it's 100 feet of racetrack that makes all the difference in the world, once you figure out how to roll that area, your lap times increase and you win races. Doesn't get any simpler than that.
Taking notes?
I mean, I understand what it means. I don't know if I can apply it.
I think you can.
And again,
I think you have.
Another
Yeah,
term
absolutely.
I have in the past. Load is another great term that a lot of people don't understand. That's kind of like the pressure, like the car, the weight to transfer onto a portion of the car. So when you're going in the corner, you load the right front. The weight is transferring there. And that's also, I mean, that kind of is the whole corner.
Yeah, each tire will take a certain amount of load. That's described as G, and you can turn and increase the load. You can add weight to it by braking or decelerating. That increases the load as well. Once you get over the grip of that tire, you have to wait until the load comes back off of that tire before the tire will respond. Mm-hmm. So every race car in the world doesn't turn. If your race car turned, you wouldn't have to lift, right?
The Daytona.
Here, the reason if you don't lift, what are you going to do? You're going to hit the wall with the right front, right? Because the
Right
car
to the
doesn't
fence.
turn.
Yep.
So as a driver, the only thing you can do once you roll out on the racetrack is try to manipulate the car to make the right front load less all the way down through there. That means maybe you turn it a little early so you get more of the weight to the right side. The right rear loads up a little bit more than the right front. Take some weight off of that. You're freewheeling down. It's on the right front. You feel it. You've been in that situation. You're like, I'm not quite steering. You got to wait until the right front tire starts to turn the car. Then you get back to the gas,
tells you to get back in the throttle.
Yeah, exactly. So you're in control of trying to change that. That's your job as a driver once the green comes out, because the crew chief can't help you anymore.
Interesting.
Race cars.
And that's why I talk about them.
101.
Love it.
So you found much of your success here at Stafford over 2 seasons, 94, 95. At what point did you leave here full-time and concentrate on the bowl? Or did you? I don't think you've really ever left the bowl. I mean, I feel like you've been there
Yeah,
since
I
your
ran
career started.
during the tri-track years here. I only ran the required amount at all
Gotcha.
3 places.
And that was SK's?
No, that was the late
models, okay.
Yeah, yep. There was seasons in the late 80s that I ran 55 races with one car at all 3 tracks. Like I had enough money to do that and had the time to do that. And there was years where I just ran 20 races at the bowl because that's what I had time for. So.
Right. And during that time, is your occupation still? Are you still doing the job of putting together those trucks, or are you kind of like doing all kinds of things?
Yeah, I started as a mechanic, and then I was a machinist, and I worked at Ed's Auto Machine building race engines. It's kind of cool. I got to put the Wilsberg 5. He's on the wall here somewhere. Got to put the engine mostly together for that thing. Working on that project. Brian Ross we did the engine in that thing too. So it was pretty natural when I went modified racing that I had a pretty good engine. I mean, Ed made sure of that.
So in the early 90s, kind of the mid 90s, kind of like the sport was booming. Was there ever opportunity to kind of like go beyond just locally? Was there ever kind of like, I think you have a couple Busch starts too, right?
Yeah, I probably ran almost a dozen Busch races. I bought a Busch car in the end of 95. I won the championship driving for Gaudreau at Waterford in the late models. And I bought a Busch car. It was actually Mike McLaughlin's. He had the two cores,
Yep.
the Busch car and the mod, the black and gold one. I bought the Busch car. Got it from a guy who helped me round it up. I got a motor from Truex. We drove to Atlantic City and got an engine from Truex and put the thing together and ran a bunch of laps at Waterford. Got ready to go. Ran Thompson for my first event in that thing. It was the number 3. We finished 15th, last car on the lead lap. Got my feet wet, had a pretty good time. Came here for the Busch race. Actually qualified second fastest. Started outside pole. Kelly Moore and I raced for a few laps, and I ended up again. I think it was 15th here, last car on the lead lap. I knew the track, which made it better for me.
And the fields were amazing for those events. I mean, you have all the regulars like the Kelly Moores and the Obies and the Dions, and then you mix in the Fullers and the Christophers and the Stefanics, and I mean, some of those events were unbelievable. Yeah,
I got a pretty cool shot coming down the backstretch. The green came out, and we headed down the backstretch. We were all still kind of doubled up. I had about a half a car on Kelly, and you can see in the picture, you can see Jamie Obie, you can see Dion, you can see Stefanik, you can see Christopher, you can see the Skoll 7. What was his name?
That's
Brandon something. What was his name?
I can still see it.
Yeah, just all these guys that are iconic for that series. It's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what other did you go to Loudon? Did you venture out?
Yep, went to Loudon, went up there. The weekend I was up there, it was raining.
I feel like it rained every weekend up there
whenever
there was a race.
My first
time
up there, and I had a V6 in that thing. I had a Hutter V6, and they had just gone back to the V8s. So I was good here, and I was really good at, like I ran some lap times at Waterford. The car went well for a V6. You turn the thing a million RPMs to make up for the lack of torque. Went to Loudon, and we were way under, but I rounded up enough money to go there anyhow, and I said, I'm just going to go there. I don't care if I drive around the back. I might not even qualify. I went out for my qualifying lap, and the track was wet, and I backed the thing in the fence, moved the back of the car over about 3 feet. We cranked it all back over with a porta power, and I had a pretty nondescript day, in and out of the pits with issues and all that stuff. That was my first time at Loudon in the Busch car, but went back the following year driving for Tony Sylvester. We had a really good car, had a Hutter V8, got in by your registration, like qualifying got rained out, but I was the 31st guy to send in my
entry blank.
My entry blank. Started 31st, and we literally passed one car every other lap, and by the end of the race, we were up to 5th. And with just a handful of laps to go, got involved in a wreck right at the end and tore the car up pretty bad. But we were going really good up there. That was fun. Way more fun than the V6.
I bet.
Yeah.
So you kind of have driven the street stock, the modified, back to a late model or a street stock, and then SK, a Busch car. Am I missing anything else? Midget. You've driven a midget.
Yeah, I drove a midget. Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I don't think so. I drove a pro stock at Thompson, a one-off.
Is there a favorite car that you've driven out of all those?
I don't think so. They're all fun in their own way. Hardest thing to drive is the late model. It's got way more power and less tire than all the other cars.
It still is the case.
Yeah. Probably the easiest thing would be, and I don't mean easy, and it ought to be easy, but the thing that's probably easier to drive is an SK Light, because the SK is pretty easy because the power versus a regular modified is completely different. So an SK Light's probably even a step down from that, from as far as just having to be up on the wheel and paying attention to tire grip and all that stuff. But the late
Easy
model's
as
hard.
in like if you're out there by yourself to do a lap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably less strenuous on you than it is when you're hustling a late model. As you know, you got to be up on the wheel all the time because the tires don't want to give you the grip that you need for everything you got going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at what point do you start to think about stuff off the racetrack, the behind-the-scenes official side of this sport?
2001-ish
Okay.
up to 2007 when I sort of quit racing. A lot of calls that were bad, race directors that didn't understand the mechanics of race cars, who's at fault. Blocking is the biggest issue we have, which I try to address all the time. That didn't even come to light with anybody that I raced with. I got called so many times from guys holding everybody up and turning themselves across my nose. I used to be livid over it, And I always said, someday when I'm done racing, I'm going to fix all that stuff.
So it kind of stemmed from a frustration in a way of what you experienced, in the sport as a driver?
Yeah. There started to be more accountability from race directors. So I'll back up a little bit.
Yeah.
I raced for quite a few years when I honestly couldn't tell you who was in the tower or if there was somebody in the tower.
And is that because the racing was just different?
It was all that I knew. It was Waterford, and I'm not picking on Waterford because I'm sure almost every short track was similar to that. But the race director, whoever was making the calls, didn't necessarily run the driver's meeting, didn't tell you what to expect, wasn't available. Nobody ever thought of storming the tower at the end of the night and telling the race director a thing or two because you weren't even sure who it was. There was just there was an era there where I'd get involved in an incident on the track and I'd drive around and I'd wait for the flagman to either tell me I was going to the back or I wasn't, and that was the end of it. There was no reason to go argue the point because you weren't even sure who you were going to see. Sometimes it was the flagman that was making the call. I mean, back then the flagman kind of ran the deal. But later on, when there was a race director and they came down and they talked to you about, they have a driver's meeting and they tell you all the stuff that they want to have happen, there started to be more accountability. So I tried to steer the conversations to be more effective on the reality of the racing, not necessarily how somebody felt about it. And I became rather passionate about it. I would like to fix all the things that happen. I work all week to drive my race car. A guy calls me out on something that clearly wasn't my issue. I got to wait another week to do it again. Right. I thought it could be better. That's all.
So when do you think the not knowing even who, the race director is almost a non-factor to the race director being an actual thing? When does that change occur, and why do you think that occurs? In your experience?
I'm not sure. And some of it early on was maybe that I just didn't pay attention to it. I don't know the answer to that, but I don't remember being at a lot of drivers' meetings and going over a lot of content ever, I think as tracks tried to move the ball forward, have more accountability, have more face time with officials and all that stuff, which is good. But that's when it gave me an avenue to say, hey, we're not doing this right, and it really became it doesn't cost you anything. It's the fee is $0 to fix the way that you do things, and we weren't applying that, in my opinion. That's all.
And so, you said 2001 to 2007. When's the first time you get involved as being an official or anything of that? And actually, to back up for the listeners who don't know Tom is our director of racing operations. Yep. He's been the race director. He takes care of kind of all the rules with the rest of the team and technical inspection, and is very, very important in what goes on here every Friday. So from 2001 to now, only 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's it's a pretty drastic a change for you from being a driver to being key component in every single Friday night.
Yep. Back it up a little bit. 98, 99. I was the I don't know what the truck series was called back then.
New England Race Truck Series.
New England Truck Series. I was the race director for that series. We traveled around, did a bunch of stuff. Kind of got hooked up with that deal. tried to manage those events, gave those truck drivers plenty of face time, told them what I expected. Like that kind of set the tone for how I thought it ought to be, but it was still sort of nondescript for local racing. I only did that till 99 or 2000. Then I built a bunch of race cars. I kind of got back into, I was out of racing for a little while, a couple of years there where I was doing that kind of stuff. Then I went racing again in 2001. I built an SK, ran that, ran a late model as well, did double duty for a few years at the Bull, running both of those. Ran late models or SK some more up until 2007. And the economy was tanking, 2007, 2008, kind of running out of money to do my SK the way that I wanted to do it. Had an engine failure. We had won 2 races. It was probably 3/4 of the way through the year. And I said I'm done for a while. And it ended up being a long while. So, yeah, exactly. So I asked the race director at that time, I said, do you need any help, like on the tech staff, whatever? So
This is at Waterford.
That's at Waterford. So the last race of 2007, I think I did tech there. Then I started off tech the following year, did tech for like the entire season. Then the Speed Bowl management changed. 2 guys that were running it, and Terry took control back and all that stuff, and he kind of cleaned house with everything. And I said, I'll be the race director, and there it was. That was the initial start on race management, I guess.
So on that, you're in the top. So you've done some of the trucks, and now you're doing the full track every Saturday night. Do you like it immediately, or is it like is it still in your mind you're there to improve something that you love, or is it like it's not a fun job. If anybody's seen what Tom and Scott and the rest of the tech guys go through, you're rarely anyone's a friend, especially at the end of the night.
Yeah. I actually think that goes better than I had thought that it would. I think that there's less I don't know. They're more respectful to me than I thought that it would ever be the case when I thought about doing this kind of work. But I truly think it's because of the FaceTime, because of the availability. I don't know that you can go to any track anywhere and have access to the guy that you need to see to make anything happen more than this place, right?
Yeah, I mean,
where are you going to go?
It's always our goal, right? Yeah. So our goal is to be accessible, right?
Yep.
And I guess my question is, when you're doing it initially, are you thinking, oh, this is cool, this is fun, or you're like, what have I done? Why do I put myself in this position? I'm stuck.
No,
is it like the job that you're like you want to leave, like the moment you step in the door? Like
no, it was actually exciting. So Terry took the track back from the guys that were managing it. There was a lot to be desired with how that whole program was working. And again, I didn't like it either, which is why I said when I quit racing, I'm going to try and fix it. Terry gave me the keys to the facility. I worked there Monday through Friday, answering the phone.
That was your full-time job.
Dealing with everything for a couple of years, and then I managed the racing on Saturday. So it was nice. I had my hand in every aspect of leading up to the gate opening and responsible for gate opening and everything that happened on the racetrack until the gate closed. I embraced it. I hired some good people. Terry hired them. Obviously I didn't, but we put in place a bunch of people, some different people than we had in the past, completely different set of operating parameters. We were talking earlier about spotters and stuff, off camera. I had spotters meetings on the backstretch. I had drivers meetings on the backstretch. I told them what they could and they couldn't do. The divisions that had radios had to treat it different than the divisions that didn't have it. Really went through a lot of content, and I actually think it made a difference. And we had a pretty good couple of years there. There was years after that I left as well. I hired Scott Tapley to be my assistant, and when I left, he stayed on to be the race director there, and obviously he's the best guy at that job in the area. Maybe even more broader than that. I mean, he's great at the craft. So it was left in good hands when I left. But I think we really had a couple of good years to kick it off, to take control back, And I think that changed. I think it changed a lot of the things that I didn't like about racing, that I thought were wrong, that the track was getting wrong. I think we had the ability and the success of fixing those, and I think that we did. I think it changed the landscape of how things work.
Yeah, now it's going to be my next question is the transition, was it that much easier because you were the guy on that racetrack not that long before that?
Yeah, I think it was, and everybody that was racing there knew me.
Right.
I go back to the speedball now, and I don't recognize 3/4 of the people, and I'm just a guy just like anybody else. But back then, I had some clout. They listened to me. You know, they knew my record there.
Yep.
They know how passionate I was about fixing things.
Were you also in charge of like the rules and stuff as well at that time?
Yeah.
there?
Yep.
And so, when do you end up at Stafford? And kind of, I don't really think I know how you ended up here. I think one day I just showed up at Tom Fox's race director. I think this Gambato's. Frankie was kind of. I think Frank retired or kind of like.
Yeah. So
made the way out, and
so
here shows up a guy named Fox that I saw a race in SKK race here in the early 2000s, and I thought he had a cool last name.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I remember Tom Fox at the fall final, and then because I think it might have been the only time you came to Stafford this season. And I'm a kid, and I'm like, who the heck is that white? Because I'm a kid here all the time, and I know every car, right?
Yeah.
What's that 40-7 out there? It was a white car.
Yeah.
And Tom Fox, I'm like, oh, that's a cool name. I wonder if he's fast. And I think he did all right.
Yeah, but we ran pretty good on our one-offs here. So I left the bowl. I became the race director for NEMA. I did the midget thing for maybe 3 years, give or take. Also started going down. I was the race director for the North-South Shootout for several years, and then I ended up being the race director for Tri-Track as well. During the North-South Shootout and Tri-Track deal, your dad Mark reached out to me, and Frankie Scambato reached out to me. Said, I don't know if Stafford's on your radar, but if you want to come up, might need some help in the tower, blah, blah, blah. It was shared with me that Frank had planned on retiring at some point. They were looking to get somebody else in as a race director, so I went up. I sat in the safety seat for a while, the right-hand seat. Went over the process for a couple of years. I was up in the tower watching how everything went, and then when Frank retired, I became the race director. It really was just a phone call. I wasn't racing much at all. That was probably 2012 or 13-ish, somewhere around there. Yeah, was it 2012? Yeah, there you go. Kyle's got it.
Of course he does.
Yeah, and I played race director for several years. And Mark and I discussed that I may be more effective boots on the ground in the paddock area, pit area, kind of running that whole process. So we set out to find somebody that could be the race director. I was very fond of Scott. I knew that he did the best job out of anybody Scott does a better job than anybody I ever raced for, hands down. He and I think alike on how the process needs to happen. He looks at things mechanically. He has race background. He has some driving experience, but he really understands the mechanics of race cars. When race cars, something as simple as you get on the straightaway and this guy turns in here. When this car continues to go all the way down around and ends up in the grass, it was his fault. It doesn't get any simpler than that. It's just physics. And if this guy drives in and punts him, he's going up the racetrack. You don't necessarily need to see the entire incident to understand what's going on. You do the forensics afterwards, if that's the case. Scott gets all of that. He calls the calls exactly like I'd call them 99% of the time. Scott's working at Lee Speedway.
Yep.
Friday nights are busy. I'm communicating with him saying, really want to move you into the tower here. He's like, I have a commitment. I want to fulfill the commitment, all that stuff. As soon as he was done at Lee, we signed him up to come. That moved me out of the tower down into the paddock area to kind of manage that whole deal. And we have a guy way better than me in the tower now. It was a home run.
Remember when Scott went up there for a couple nights, I was talking to you, and I was like, I think Scott is pretty good, and I think your comment was, yeah, he makes me look like a terrible race director the moment I stepped out of there, but it's a hard job.
That's
It's
a
hard
tough job for sure.
You're
Yep.
never a good guy.
No,
Never.
toughest job in motorsports.
But it's very, very,
Absolutely.
very important.
Yes.
Especially now with, 5 divisions a week, sometimes 6. It's the continuity of the event is so important for the fan and for the teams and the drivers.
Yep.
If we can get 6 divisions complete by 10 o'clock, which we often do,
Yeah.
it's a sign of a good race director and a good racing operations team.
Yeah. The plan here forever, what the goal is to get cars in and out, to make the fans satisfied, to be safe. Everything that the Arute family has strived for is actually part of Scott's agenda before he even got here.
Yeah.
So
That's why it works so well.
absolutely.
Coming to Stafford, was there more, I don't want to say pressure, but is coming to Stafford a little more daunting of a task than your home track at Waterford? And, Waterford you kind of grew up at, you worked there full time, outside of race nights, versus coming to Stafford, once a week and running
Yeah.
the show?
Yeah. If I would have thrown right to the director's chair, it would have been. But I had a season and a half of being in the tower. I knew 90% of the players. Mm-hmm. I have a personal relationship with everybody that raced when I came here, and I still do. So none of that was really, it didn't really throw me for a loop. What was interesting, I thought that I did a pretty good job at the Bowl with the staff that I had in making that place completely different. And actually, we were getting races done on time. We were penalizing people. We were doing all the things that needed to happen. I came here, I worked with Frank, and then I became the race director, and I still had reins on me. I wasn't allowed to do all the stuff that I thought I needed to do. And sometimes I drive home thinking, why don't they just let me do my vision? Well, the answer to that, clearly, is that your dad and your mom have a vision. And why would they give me the keys to the place, right? How long have they worked to make this place what it is?
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to give me the keys when I roll in here, right? Of
Yeah.
course not. They're going to make sure that I understand the goal and I create the process to get there safely and repeatedly before they're going to let you do your thing. And that's exactly how the process happened.
Yeah, and I think that's, on this podcast a lot over the last couple of seasons, we kind of explained why some decisions are made. Example, the late models, right? Mm-hmm. The Arute family can be very stubborn. Is that correct, Tom?
It's capital S-T-U-B.
In a lot of times, it's for a reason. It's usually pretty intentional. I know
It always is.
We often joke is when my dad's a pain in the ass, which can be it can happen. He's rarely wrong,
That's correct.
which
Yep.
to both of our dismay often is like, oh yeah, he said
Yeah.
that a week ago. We were both wrong.
No doubt. I had that
Yeah.
conversation with Zach on the way up
Yeah.
here. It's like you're not gonna put a situation out here that your dad hasn't seen multiple times and made good choices and bad choices, but clearly know the right choice.
Yeah,
And he expresses that to us on a regular basis.
yeah, which is important to tell the racers and fans that everything's intentional here, right? It's like every choice that is made at Stafford is for the long-term purpose.
Yeah, there's a
Whether
bigger
it's-
picture.
Exactly. Whether it's being no tour race this year or changing the Sizzler or not changing the late models. Everything is intentional, and we'll see it through. It's not like we're going to change our mind, right? Because we wouldn't have made the choice unless we, thought about it and
Yeah.
projected why the choice was made.
Sure. And the choice is hardly haphazard.
Never.
No.
Never.
No.
We wouldn't have done a change if it didn't have to be done.
Yeah, and all of the potentials are discussed. We spent more time this morning talking about line items for an event
Yeah.
than anybody would ever think possible. So it is on purpose. It's thoroughly thought through, and then I like to think that it's executed very well.
Yeah, and I think the same can be said about the rules. I know, a lot of times over the last 5 or 6 seasons, there's been small changes that people don't understand or like, but to where we've gotten to today, I think we have 5 great divisions plus the open mods, And we really kind of the landscape of the sport in Connecticut and New England has changed for the better. I would like to. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no doubt. I think car counts. I don't even know where to begin, but if you look at a successful business model for a racetrack, I think that we're doing that, and I think that the other tracks feed off of that, get the benefit of that. If Connecticut, if the 3 tracks were spiraling down, it wouldn't matter who was leading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's the best at going downhill, right?
Yeah.
So, but the fact is that Thompson is making a comeback, which is good. It's a great facility. It's got a lot of history. 6 events. Hopefully they can make that work. The other thing that can't go without being said when I'm talking about that is we all agree that healthy racetracks with healthy car counts is the best thing that can happen for Stafford Speedway.
Yep.
X racetrack going out of business isn't a good thing for us. It's not good for the industry. It's not good for us. Mm-hmm. So we would rather have anybody local feed off of what we're doing, take the ball, run with it, make their program more successful, so all the racers that have the ability to come to us have successful venues to go to. That's the best thing for the sport. And if it's the best thing for the sport, it's probably going to be a good thing for Stafford.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's I think it's interesting too because it's a lot of pressure on us to make sure we don't blow it.
Yep.
Right. We have a saying a lot of times where if we have a mistake, we try to own up to it. I don't think I can say what the saying is we usually say, but when we have a mistake, we typically try to just solve it immediately, right? Like, how many times have we been here at 1 a.m. down in the tech area or up in the office with something just blew up in our paces, and we're trying to make sure it never happens again.
Yeah.
It's often, and I think it's important for the fans to understand that in the drivers, and I think a lot of them do.
Yeah, I think our drivers do, and again, it's a lot of it is the FaceTime. You're accessible, David's accessible, your dad's accessible.
Yeah.
Anybody that a competitor wants to talk to, they can do that. I mean, they can go right up the ladder and get to anybody they want to.
Anybody.
And you don't see that anywhere. I tell Kyle a lot. I raced at Thompson 30 times over the course of 20 years. Don Honig doesn't know me. He wouldn't pick me out of a lineup if there was $1 million on the line. I won some races at his racetrack. I won a couple of World Series, right? Like, they're not accessible to the average person. In most racetracks, you have that going on. In Terry's heyday, he stood at the gate and everybody knew him. That's part of the promoter in him that was effective, and it worked. And you guys have the same thing going on here. There's nobody that you can't get to talk about whatever you think needs to happen. And I don't think it happens at enough racetracks or businesses for that matter.
It's very important.
Yeah.
How and to bounce off of that, this is obviously going to be on social media. How has social media changed the game in the last 15 years? Because everybody has a camera now. Everybody sits in those stands and can deliver their opinion and thoughts. Where 20, 30 years ago, you didn't have that.
Even
Not
when
even
you
close
started as a racetrack in 2007,
it has evolved so much.
Social media doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, it does, but not too. I mean, it's just kind of a place where Kyle and I are friends. There's no video of the scale pad after the races.
Instantly.
Yeah. I think Stafford utilizes social media tremendously, leading the country in how to promote your racetrack. So there's a great side to it.
There's positives for sure. I'm the biggest proponent of the positives.
Yeah, absolutely. The downside is all those people suck. They have the ability to armchair quarterback incorrectly 90% of the time every situation that has happened. That's not good for the sport. I don't know how you get rid of that, but keep the positives. I don't know that you can. I think that Stafford does a great job of balancing that out. We also try to dot our I's and cross our T's so we don't get caught in the crossfire of social media. If you flip open social media, you'll see racetracks where stuff is going on. Thankfully, it's not us, 99% of the time. So we're controlling it to the best that we can by being thorough and doing all the things that we do as a group. But I don't know how you stop the keyboard warriors from ruining anything, whether it's the town doing paving on the road at all the wrong hours of the day, or the fact that they didn't have canned green beans at Big Y. You know, like I don't get
That's
any
life.
part of that.
That's not just Stafford. That's everywhere, everything.
But you know what I think is interesting, Kyle, on that same note, I think what we've done here at Stafford over the last 5 to 10 seasons is kind of pass the ownership of the place to the fans and the drivers.
Yep.
It's their place.
Yep. Yeah.
So, I mean, if I'm a person who sits in Section A every Friday 20 times a year, and I love this place, I feel like Stafford is my place. Or if I'm a driver who comes here every single Friday, and I see Joe Schmo, who's never even been here, bashing a decision in tech.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times it gets solved itself by our supporters.
Yes.
And I think that's very key because, I mean, yeah, Stafford is ours, is the owners, as the employees, but it's really the fans in the driver's place. It's everybody's.
Yeah. Yep. That's a good point. Yeah. And that does happen as well. I mean, I'll read plenty of people come to our support when we're being called out incorrectly, sometimes even correctly. You know, people are passionate.
And watch, I say this, and the comments on this podcast are going to be. So I got one more question here.
Sure.
From when you started in the sport and kind of progressing along, what do you kind of identify as the biggest changes, or for the better, for the worse, or if there's trends that have occurred and are occurring again? Like, what are some of the items that come up in your mind?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have a whole lot of answers right off the cuff. The sport is cyclical. There's no doubt about it. Just car count and competition ebbs and flows. Every track I've ever been a part of, whether I'm racing or managing or whatever, there's times when you can't make the racing go bad, and there's times when you struggle and you have a hard time making the racing go good, in spite of your best efforts and your team and all that stuff. So there's a lot of influence that happens in racing and life in general. Just if things are happening over here in all these areas, it's going to happen to us as well, that we may or may not be able to control very well. But that's the cyclical part of it. The economy is going to, obviously we had some tire issues last year. We're going to have parts issues this year. Just the cost of racing. There's a lot of things that we can't control. Our competition is great right now. I think that we may see a decline this year. I hope not, but I can't afford to do all the things that I used to do. I have a hard time believing if you've got a race car that it's going to be just as easy as it was last year. That kind of stuff has happened all through time at all racetracks. 08, the depression that we went through, that the bottom dropped out. I quit racing. I quit driving because of that at that point in time. We may be seeing that again. I don't know the answer to that, but the price of everything is going up. At some point, that'll stabilize everybody to get back on top of the game. Things will look really good. We'll sell a bunch of RVs and boats, and then we'll go right back to that same old deal. But to directly answer your question, just that kind of stuff affecting racing is really all that I've noticed for 25 years. The sport, clearly social media has played a big part in how the sport gets promoted and torn down, unfortunately, as we talked about as well. But I really don't, I don't really know of, like, nothing stands out to me. I've been an integral part of it, so I don't get that step back and look at thing. I know Cup racing has changed tremendously. The top three has changed. I don't follow that hardly at all, and I was knee deep in it 15 years ago. I don't know why that is, but the sport in general, we keep moving the ball forward. We keep doing a good job of what we're doing, and that's really been my focus. And general trends, I don't really keep an eye on that much.
It's not my last question.
Good, because it was a lousy answer.
The SKs over the last 2 or 3 seasons have been incredible.
Yeah.
Is there any other racing that you've seen before that's been that competitive and having the racing be that good? Because I know I've watched a lot of races at Stafford, at least, over the years.
Yep.
Probably all of them that I've been alive for that I can remember. That I seen them all, right?
Yeah.
I've never seen anything as good as the SKs, and the fact that 10 different guys can get a victory. I would never have. I would, if you asked me that 10 years ago, I said no way. 5 to 8, maybe 8. 8 would be 10 different drivers, and almost all of them are graduates of SK Lights or karts even. It's just, what's your opinion on the SKs? Like how it's so deep.
Yeah, the racing is phenomenal. I think across the country, you could argue that it's one of the best shows on pavement, no doubt about it. Factor in things like if you go to World of Outlaw Sprint Car Racing, there's a wow factor there. It's crazy to watch those guys do their thing. But at the end of the day, the competition level, weekly event, there is nothing that I've seen ever like what we're experiencing right now. And it started years back. Like the trend started when the spec we changed from a regular SK engine to like the spec engine. I don't know what the mechanics are that made the whole thing fall in line, but the racing got better and has evolved to where it is now at the start of that. And I don't really know how to tie that back to that, but that it could just be a coincidence, the timing and all that stuff. But the racing is good. The surface is good right now. There's grip. Aero comes into play. We were talking about aero before. It's insane to think that there's any aero, down the backstretch. It's crazy.
Really important.
Yeah.
The modifieds especially.
Yeah. If you asked me 10 years ago, I would have laughed and said 10 years from now, I'll never tell you that aero was important here.
That's an interesting comment on the grip, too, because the second lane has really come in.
Yeah.
And, there'll be a night where you'll see the SKs, the top lanes even preferred. Yep.
Yeah.
Which growing up here, they paved the place in 96. It was a bottom feeder track.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the bash that some of the keyboard folks will say.
Yeah.
Oh, Stafford is a bottom. I mean, it's too flat, only single lane.
Yeah.
It's really not the case anymore, even in the open cars.
Nope.
You got to go to the top.
Yeah. Yep. You do. So the grip is out there. The surface is in good shape. You don't run a bunch of junk shows here like many of the other tracks do and kill the surface. They're great for making a lot of money on a Sunday afternoon, but I don't think they do your racing any justice. I'm glad we don't do that here for sure.
Okay, now my final question.
Third final question.
What do you think about the 2022? I keep getting it wrong. 2022 is schedule. I think it's one of our best we put together in a long time. What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to? And what do you think of it?
Yeah, I think every one of our weekly divisions is exciting to me. So all of our shows start off really good. I'm really excited about the Sizzler. There's no doubt. The format is really cool. It's unique. I think we're going to get a pile of cars there. Looking forward to that. There's going to be so much racing for the modifieds in particular with the format that you guys have created. And that's just starting the season off, And then we have all the other open races. The schedule is good. It's better than last year. I'm a fan of what we do on our own, being independent. I always have been a fan of that. So that suits me well as well.
That's all I got.
What's your last question?
I could go all day.
As could I. But unfortunately, we have gone over our,
we'll have to
our
have you
hour.
back again.
Absolutely. Tom, as always, thanks for joining us here on The Bottom Shot, and can't wait to get going here in a couple months' time.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Paul.